What do you feel when you look at these images? Refreshed and rejuvenated like you're drinking a cold, crisp and bubbly soda? An overwhelming sense of relaxation and calm? Or hope for the advanced technological utopia that we one day could be living in? Well, that's not by accident. All of these images fall under the aesthetic known as Frutiger Aero, a light, bright and bubbly aesthetic meant to evoke feelings of positivity, optimism and refreshment. From rolling fields of green to curved, glossy Y2K tech to bubbles and shoals of fish, Frutiger Aero has an incredibly unique and distinctive look. Though the aesthetic is distinctly 2000s, it's experienced a huge boom in popularity in the last few years, with the hashtag Frutiger Aero now used over 30 million times on TikTok. And it's not just Frutiger Aero, but tons of similar and related aesthetics such as Frutiger Eco, Frutiger Metro, Dark Aero, Funky Seasons, Vector Flourish, Skew Morphism, and more. So today let's take a look at Frutiger Aero. What it is, how it came to be, its fascinating history, and why it and similar 2000s aesthetics are coming back into the spotlight. Before we jump in, I just want to give a huge thank you to Cool Shirts for sponsoring this video. I'm sure a lot of you already know what Cool Shirts is, but just let me gush about it for a moment. I absolutely love Cool Shirts because the designs are super silly and goofy, but they also just look cool as hell. And there are so many different aesthetics to choose from, funnily enough, considering the topic of this video. From bright kidcore silliness to darker gothic styles, there's genuinely something for everyone. These pieces have such epic details as well. Stunning embroidery, tie-dye details, custom tags, and fun little quotes hidden in the designs. The paint Sherpa is one of my favorites. I wear it all the time. Not only is it reversible, but the zip itself literally says very all along the zip. This is literally the coolest zip I've ever seen. I don't even know how they did this. I love wearing bold, bright fits, and I love when garments have little bespoke details and are super unique, so Cool Shirts is literally perfect for any occasion. And you know what, this shirt speaks to me because I am an IBS warrior, and 90% of the time, my tummy does hurt. Despite the name, shirts are not the only thing they have to offer. There are bags, hats, socks, keycaps, desk mats, and much more, plus worldwide shipping. Head to shirtswithaz.cool/izzies to get 10% off your order. That's shirtswithaz.cool/izzies to get 10% off your order. Thank you so much to the amazing, the swag, the epic, the incredibly cool Cool Shirts for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into things. It's hard to discuss Frutiger Aero and its associated aesthetics without first discussing what aesthetics are to begin with, because the definition has changed so much over time and can mean so many different things for so many different people. As defined by the Aesthetics Wiki, which is an invaluable and incredibly comprehensive source on the topic, quote, "Aesthetics have now come to mean a collection of images, colors, objects, music, and writings that creates a specific emotion, purpose, and community. All aesthetics have a background and history that has a variety of origins. Aesthetics can relate to fashion and lifestyle, from coquette to cottagecore to TikTok's clean girls and rockstar GFs. They can relate to art and literature like Art Nouveau, Surrealism, and horror. And they can, and often do, relate back to various web and internet aesthetics, which brings us back to Frutiger Aero. Frutiger Aero, also known as Web 2.0 Gloss or Digital Dream Utopia, is a design style that was popular during the early 2000s to late 2010s, generally pinpointed from 2004 to 2013. Defined by its bright, glossy, and futuristic look, Frutiger Aero's common motifs include nature, technology, bright colors, bokeh, glossiness, bubbles, water, and glass. This image is a perfect example of the aesthetic. It combines the serenity of an expansive green field under a blue sky with a bubble containing the MSN logo. It goes even deeper though, as that green field is the screensaver of Windows XP, adding yet another layer to the crossover between nature and technology. From a Dazed article on the recent rise of Frutiger Aero, explained by Sophie Lee, the researcher who first identified and named Frutiger Aero, quote, "Lee explains that other prominent motifs of Frutiger Aero include bokeh, auroras, globes, and glassy transparent materials, that is, virtual things resembling their real-life counterparts. This adds up to a naturalistic aesthetic that provides a feeling of the indoors and outdoors merging together, an apt representation of an era where the arrival of smartphones was transforming the internet from something locked away in a computer room to a living and breathing entity all around us. Don't ask me why, but one super common motif is fish. There are tons of Frutiger Aero images which are perfectly normal, and then bam, angelfish flying gracefully among a burst of bubbles in a cool refreshing stream of water. These super bright in-your-face images with like 20 lens flares and butterflies and a computer with a shoal of fish coming out of it are commonly used as examples of Frutiger Aero online, but the style can and often was more subtle during its peak popularity. For example, this Windows 7 login page, which I'm sure that many of you will remember fondly. It's not as jam-packed and stereotypically Frutiger Aero-y, for lack of a better word, but if you look closely you'll see that it incorporates many key motifs. The bright sky blue background is lit by a bright light and accompanied by lens flares, bokeh, and a very light curved line reminiscent of wind. Additionally, all the buttons in UI have a glossy sheen. Also, sorry if I keep using the words glossy and shiny over and over again to describe this aesthetic, but it's just the best word for it. This aesthetic really is just glossy as hell. I don't know what else to tell you. The appeal of Frutiger Aero wasn't just what it looked like, though it did of course look very pleasing to the eye, but what it represented. The harmonic balance of technology and nature represented the idea of this beautiful technological utopia that we could one day be living in, and in the early to mid 2000s during the tech boom this was beginning to feel like an achievable reality. Technology was rapidly advancing. Home computers and cell phones and video game consoles were not only widely available but becoming more and more accessible for the everyday person, and it was exciting. Frutiger Aero really represents this newfound curiosity about technology and how it could be incorporated into society. As silly as it sounds, with cynical hindsight, these beautiful spotless utopian images with computers sitting in fields and fish swimming around MSN logos are what many hoped the future would look like with the help of new technology. Despite many interpreting it as an overcluttered and tacky 2000s aesthetic that has long since run its course, there's actually way more to Frutiger Aero than meets the eye. So let's go back to the beginning to figure out how this 2000s vision of the future actually came to be. It can be argued that the Frutiger Aero aesthetic has roots tracing all the way back to the 90s with the development of Windows XP. The operating system came packaged with that oh-so-iconic greenfield wallpaper, and certain elements of the UI incorporated shiny buttons and toolbars. But the definitive Frutiger Aero operating system came with the creation of Windows Vista in 2001. At the time, the early development build of Vista was codenamed Project Longhorn, and from early development pitches we can see strong elements of Frutiger Aero. Light, airy design, images of serene and beautiful nature, and lots of gloss. It introduced these glass-like borders which were translucent, allowing you to see images and programs underneath. It was sleek, it was shiny, and it was modern. And I know it's easy to hear that and scoff because by today's standards it looks pretty outdated, but that's because we're judging it by today's standards. This is what web design had looked like for a long time, clunky and boxy and often pretty dull, so this colourful, shiny new system was like a vision of the future. The term Frutiger Aero actually didn't exist until 2017 when Sophie Lee, a researcher at the Consumer Aesthetics Research Institute, or CARI, identified and named the aesthetic. Before this time, the aesthetic was generally known as Digital Dream Utopia or Web 2.0 Gloss, but this was only for lack of a better and more official term. The name Frutiger Aero comes from two major elements of the aesthetic: the Frutiger family of fonts and Aero, which was a design language for Windows 7 and Windows Vista. The Frutiger typeface was created in 1976 by Swiss designer Adrian Frutiger and featured heavily on early color computers. Windows Aero was a design language for Windows Vista and Windows 7. Aero was actually an acronym for Authentic, Energetic, Reflective, and Open. It was this motto that guided the design and style of the operating systems, with their bright, energetic colors, reflective, glossy surfaces, and light, airy, and open designs. Needless to say, Windows was and still is a hugely popular mainstream operating system used by millions across the globe. With that much reach, it's only natural that its design choices are going to seep into mainstream culture and influence, well, basically everything. Thus, Frutiger Aero rose to prominence throughout the mid to late 2000s thanks to the help of several huge brands adopting the style for their own marketing and products. The Xbox 360, Nintendo DS Lite, and especially the Nintendo Wii are all examples of mainstream gaming consoles that adopted the Frutiger Aero aesthetic. In 2004, Apple's iconic iPod silhouette advertising campaign dropped, which incorporated elements of Frutiger Aero alongside another classic 2000s aesthetic called Funky Seasons. We'll get into all of the related aesthetics and subgenres in a bit though. By 2007, the retail version of Windows Vista had officially been released, as well as Mac OS X Leopard, two hugely popular operating systems. The first iPhone was also released, which was obviously a huge deal and incorporated heavy elements of Frutiger Aero, with brightly colored gradients, gloss and shine effects, and simplistic airy UI. These marketing titans helped to cement Frutiger Aero as a defining style of the mid to late 2000s, and once you know what to look for, you'll see it everywhere. Walkmans and boomboxes, bubbly headphones, shiny white corporate offices filled with plants, yogurt shop chairs, lip gloss and body spray and fish bowls, the translucent glassy texture of Windows Vista boxes, Peggle, Media Player, Mac PCs and MSN, and all kinds of amazing art and web design from all corners of the net. Despite often being dubbed as the aesthetic you forgot to remember, Frutiger Aero was an incredibly permeating and ubiquitous influence on 2000s culture, to the point where it's often dubbed as the successor to the hugely popular 90s and early 2000s Y2K aesthetic. Though the two share a distinctly glossy, futuristic look, Frutiger Aero was more refined and corporate, more likely to be found in stock photos, corporate offices, and tech advertising than worn by a celebrity or in a teen magazine. As the late 2000s progressed into the 2010s and Frutiger Aero's influence was as strong as ever, more and more subgenres and niche styles began to branch out from under the Frutiger Aero umbrella, as illustrated by this image created by Bloom City. These related aesthetics can help us to understand what influenced Frutiger Aero, as well as what it went on to influence in turn, plus a lot of them are just super interesting. Seriously, most of these I had never heard of by name, but as soon as I saw them, they brought back all these floods of childhood memories of the 2000s and the many weird and wacky styles that were popular at the time. Cybercore, aka Y2K futurism, is one of the earliest precursors to the Frutiger family, and while on the surface they look pretty starkly different, with Cybercore's dark metallic tech clashing against Aero's softer naturalistic look, Frutiger Aero wouldn't exist without it. Cybercore has roots in the underground UK rave scene of the 80s and 90s, but became established in the late 90s with the start of the internet boom. Cybercore and Frutiger Aero were both born during eras where technology was rapidly advancing and being made more accessible to the public. Perhaps because of the general cynicism towards technology during the 90s, the discontent of the youth, the fearmongering surrounding the Y2K bug, its roots in underground culture, or a mix of all of these things and more, Cybercore tended to be far darker and more grungy compared to Frutiger Aero's more light and optimistic look, which was more of a commercial take on what the world could look like if you brought insert brand name here's product. Now this is just a side tangent, but one subgenre of Cybercore is called Metal Heart, and not only is that literally the coolest name for any aesthetic I've ever heard, but it also just looks cool as fuck. It's that sort of edgy, dark, futuristic, matrixy style that you saw a lot in the 2000s, a surprising amount actually considering how sharp and dark and abstract it looks in retrospect. Super cool, not really too similar to Frutiger Aero, but I still wanted to mention it because it looks cool as fuck. Frutiger Metro, hilariously also known as Vector Vomit, is a cousin aesthetic of Frutiger Aero. Though it was initially classified as a subgenre, its quote-unquote broad nature and proliferation throughout the 2000s made it stand alone as its own aesthetic. Still, it's easy to see why the two are so often connected. Just like Frutiger Aero's name came from the Aero design language of Windows Vista and Windows 7, Frutiger Metro's name came from the Metro design language of Windows 8. They also share similar qualities such as bright colors, blooming flourishes, imagery of nature and technology, and glossy reflective surfaces. Frutiger Metro, however, is far flatter, rarely ever using real imagery and instead opting for 2D images, artwork, and vectors. I mean, it was clearly called Vector Vomit for a reason. It was super cluttered, or as the TikTok girlies would call it, maximalist, with clashing colors, patterns, and textures overlapping to create big, bold, and bright pieces. If you grew up in the 2000s, as I did, you'll remember this aesthetic well. I remember a lot of kids' clothing having Frutiger Metro designs, as well as toy and product packaging and phone wallpapers / PC screensavers. Frutiger Eco is a subgenre of Frutiger Aero. From the aesthetics wiki, quote, "If It focuses on renewable energy and living in harmony with nature while also incorporating futuristic themes and architecture centered around nature and sustainability. Like Aero, Eco portrays this bright, beautiful utopia filled with nature and greenery, though rather than putting the focus on commercial technology like computers or phones, the focus is more often on sustainable and renewable technology like solar panels and wind turbines. Though Frutiger Eco did find some popularity during the 2000s, it was less so than its counterparts, and even then it was mainly in the realm of cleaning products or eco-friendly corporate advertisements. Vector Flourish is basically like if Metro and Eco had a baby, combining a flat, bright vector-based style with strong imagery of nature, including clusters of flowers, vines, leaves, and windy swirls. Comparing Vector Flourish and Frutiger Aero, it's clear that the former was hugely inspired by the latter, especially as they began to form around the same era. Some other notable related aesthetics include Frutiger Aurora, which is pretty self-explanatory, think generic Windows background and you've basically got it. Musica Metro, also known as Frutiger Musica, is a soft and lush aesthetic utilizing all of the gloss and sparkle of Frutiger Aero but with a heavy emphasis on music. Obviously this one was most often used for album covers or music advertisements, but a surprising amount of generic wallpapers and artwork was made featuring random assortments of music notes and musical elements just because it looked cool, I guess. Dark Aero is a subgenre of Frutiger Aero which incorporates all of the same design elements with a darker color palette. Due to the simpler, sleeker palette and look, Dark Aero was used long after Frutiger Aero fell out of fashion, mainly for car and tech commercials. My personal favorite is Helvetica Aqua Aero, also known as Frutiger Aqua, which focuses solely on imagery of the ocean, water, beaches, and aquatic creatures. Those tropical fish that we touched on earlier play a huge role in this subgenre of aesthetic, but dolphins, turtles, seabirds, and seashells can also play a pretty big role. You'll mostly find Helvetica Aqua Aero in screensavers and wallpapers of the 2000s, but it also appears in some unexpected places. This real-life hospital, for example, or these classic computer mice with translucent water decals built into them. The How It Feels to Spread Misinformation Online image can also hilariously be classified as an example of Helvetica Aqua Aero. RCU, or Renewable Corporate Utopia, is a subgenre of the Frutiger Aero and corporate aesthetics, incorporating Aero's bright natural vision of the future with the clean-cut advertising slickness of a corporate style. Naturally, this one is basically used solely in business and product advertising, promising a beautiful green utopia filled with lush fields and expansive white offices to anyone willing to invest in the company's business. With all of these many genres, both expansive and hyper niche, you'd think that the Frutiger family of aesthetics would be more well known in the public conscience, or at least given more credit for its impact on 2000s culture. And while the aesthetic has gone largely unrecognized for many years, recently it's had a huge resurgence. But why is that exactly? Why is it popular again? Why now? Well, let's have a look. The hashtag Frutiger Aero on TikTok contains thousands of videos from Aero-inspired makeup and bedroom decor to lists of modern products utilizing the aesthetic to simple slideshows of Frutiger Aero images from Google, accompanied by the relaxing digital chimes of the Wii channel music or the Xbox 360 avatar editing theme. There are entire communities on Twitter and Reddit dedicated to archiving and sharing the Frutiger Aero aesthetic through images, video, art, and music. Looking up Frutiger Aero on YouTube will result in countless playlists themed after the aesthetic, with relaxing ambient tunes from the web of the 2000s accompanied by gameplay and imagery relating to it. These videos are meant to provide a respite to pop up on your For You page or your home page and transport you back to the comfort and safety of 2000s nostalgia, if only for a brief minute. And it's this feeling of comfort and safety that plays a huge part in why Frutiger Aero is back. It's easy to chalk the sudden reappearance of Frutiger Aero up to the whole 20-year cycle. You know, something becomes super cool and hip, and then everyone hates it and discards it, and then it goes forgotten, and then about 20 years later it resurges in the public conscience, more nostalgic and appealing than ever before. You've probably seen this cycle happen with countless trends, but I think there's a bit more to it than that. Frutiger Aero at its core represents hope. I already know that you're rolling your eyes and going to click off the video after hearing that, but please, I implore you, let me plead my case. The aesthetic came about during an era where technology was new and exciting and becoming increasingly more accessible. The possibilities were seemingly infinite and hopes were high, not only that this technology could improve lives, but that it could improve humanity. The aesthetic combined the old and the new, nature and technology, in this beautiful harmonious vision of the future that gave people hope that one day with enough progression we could be living in this peaceful ecotech paradise. Unfortunately, over the years, these hopes were all but crushed. As we know now, the rapid advancement of technology and the tech industry itself has contributed heavily to the climate crisis that we're now facing. Devices like computers and smartphones contain a ton of different metals, and the mass mining of these metals has led to pollution and deforestation, not to mention the human rights abuses that so often take place at these facilities. The tech industry also uses vast amounts of power and energy, leaving a huge carbon footprint. After the Frutiger Aero era ended, the new trendy aesthetic in design and advertising was what's known as the flat design style. It washed out all of the bright colors, took away all of the vibrancy, and made everything uniform, dull, and corporate. Technology tracks our every move to more effectively advertise to us. Mobile games are predatory gambling machines for kids. The cost of living is going up and no one can afford anything anymore. The government refuses to act, there is a loneliness epidemic, and while everyday people suffer, CEOs and tech giants get obscenely rich off of that suffering. And hey, I don't mean to be a downer, but I think that we can all at least agree that our current reality couldn't be any further from Frutiger Aero's peaceful tech utopia. And I think that's why so many people are drawn to it. Not only does it remind a lot of people of their childhoods / young adulthoods, which always gives people the warm fuzzies anyway, but it also reminds people of a simpler, more optimistic time. A time where technology wasn't so scary or cynical or harmful and morally corrupt, but instead new and exciting. People were holding the information highway in their hands, and the world seemed to be brimming with possibilities. Flying cars, beautiful green eco-cities, a world without famine or sickness. It was a nice dream, and it's bittersweet looking back at the sort of naive optimism of that time. I think that Frutiger Aero is back because, well, we kind of need it. Right now, more than ever, we need something to cling on to, a beautiful idea, a faraway distant possibility, a glimmer of hope. Maybe deep down we still believe that one day the world could look like this. Or maybe it's nice to be transported back, even just for a second, to a simpler, more optimistic time. Maybe we don't believe in Frutiger Aero and everything that it stands for now, but once upon a time we did, and maybe it's just nice to pretend to be back there. Again, I don't mean to be a bummer, and I know this stuff is grim, but that's because, well, things are grim at the moment. But look on the bright side, the resurgence of the bright poppy and fun Frutiger Aero at a time where the world is anything but is an example of how powerful and important aesthetics are. Many are quick to discount them as shallow internet trends or goofy looking styles that the youths are into, but aesthetics have always played an important role in history and our society. They help people to express themselves, they encapsulate eras and trends and history, and they lift people up during hard times. It's beautiful in a way, all of the many varied ways that humans express themselves, and looking at all of these niche aesthetics, especially in a wider context, is really important, at least in my opinion. Frutiger Aero may just seem like that silly, bubbly Windows theme from all those years back, but there's so much more to it than that. And I hope that in some way this video helped you to love and appreciate Frutiger Aero and all of its quirks, as many others do. At the very least, I hope it was educational in some way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed the topic. Frutiger Aero is one of my favorite aesthetics at the moment. Like many of you, I only really came to know of it recently when it's had a resurgence. Obviously I was there for when it was popular, but it didn't have a name and I didn't really recognize it as its own aesthetic style. But now that I do, I've come to really love it. I think it just encapsulates everything great about my childhood on the internet, and I'm sure many of you feel the same. But I'm curious to hear from everyone. I've actually seen a lot of things on TikTok or Reddit related to Frutiger Aero where people get really fearful or freaked out or unsettled or even feel really like nauseous seeing images of Frutiger Aero. Some speculate that it's related to the whole uncanny valley thing, or that it's like a utopia and that's like depressing and scary because it's fake and kind of like a little bit too perfect. Anyway, it's really interesting. I'd be very curious to hear from anyone who has that perspective, because I think that's a little bit more interesting. It's an interesting take on on the aesthetic. So I'm very curious to hear from you. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you remember it from your childhood? What kind of other hyper niche aesthetics do you like? I really like looking into all these like super specific aesthetics, especially from that era. So if you have any other cool ones that I should look up, let me know. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! A huge thank you to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon. Jar the Bar, Zoe Mars, Sophie H, Thy Heavenly, Leanne O, Hazy, Jet Secret, Oliver Brains, Blue Mayfeld, Katrina Likes 5e Stuff, Fitzy, Michelle Olsen, Matt LRJ, A Riddle Wrapped in Enigma Hidden by a Question Mark, Chicory, Doug, Dana Homegardener, Charlie B, Simon, Xavier Araujo, Helm Hamburger Hand, Durzo Blint, Sheriff Whiskey, Astrian Vortex, Jesse Chisholm, Lee XX, Grip Gunderson, and Joe Bradshaw. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. It means the world. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description. And yeah, thank you so much. It means the world to me. And I really hope that you enjoyed the video. And I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye!